It is painful when you can glimpse literally into a person's future and know that the situation's never going to change or get better. But the greater grief is when you start losing the person that you were trying to help. In some cases, they may straight up get angry at you and push back. They may even suggest that you're the one who has something wrong with you. Maybe even you're narcissistic. There's a lot of hard things about narcissistic relationships, but it's also really hard when you feel like you can't help someone who's in a narcissistic relationship, especially when it's happening in your family. There's a lot of grief around that. Now, I had the privilege of doing a workshop in London recently, and one topic that really stayed with me now that I'm back was how we cope with certain kinds of narcissistic family situations. And one of the most profound ones was cases in which we are witnessing a family member who is stuck in the narcissistic relationship cycle. It may, for example, be a non-narcissistic parent who stays with the narcissistic parent. It could be an empathic sibling who keeps going into the family system to deal with or care for an ungrateful narcissistic parent or parents. Even a friend we're watching who's in any kind of narcissistic relationship, for example, with a partner. You may really get it because you've been through it yourself and you may want to help someone else. Or maybe you just want to help them and still are trying to figure it out. You may offer guidance, support, therapy referrals, videos, books, more advice, support, and even a means out. You may offer the non-narcissistic parent, for example, a place to stay. You may offer the sibling money so they don't have to rely on your parents. You may offer the friend a place to stay or other options. It can get particularly tricky if they keep hearing you, keep listening, but then when it comes down to it, may say, okay, all right, hon, I'll come visit you and see the kids, but I don't feel comfortable leaving your father behind. Or the sibling may say to you, what would be helpful is maybe if you came and stayed with them, with the parents, and then I can get a break. So in essence, the person you're trying to help may say, I'll come visit you, or I'll do the thing you want, come stay with you, or not keep doing things for parents who would be capable of doing them, or even just getting a break for caring for them. But in trying to help them, there's a risk that you're going to get pulled back into the system. And then your heart breaks because you're put into one of the millions of double binds, the so-called catch-22s, that narcissistic family systems raise. You realize that to save or rescue or help someone still stuck in that system, you may have to get pulled in again yourself. You may have extended the helping hand, the life preserver, but they're threatening to pull you into the water with them. You feel as though you're abandoning this person if you say, I can't do it, because you spent years trying to heal. So what do you do when they're trying to put you into one of these no-win situations? I'm going to be frank with you. My hope is that you walk away. I know it's hard, but that's my hope. Because this is the paradox of the narcissistic family relationship, especially when you are still trying to get good people out of it. It can feel like trying to get people out of a burning building, but the person you are trying to help is insisting you go back upstairs and make sure you turn off the lights first. But it's worse than that. It's going into that burning building, risking yourself, saving the person who started the fire, and then maybe the person you really want to save will consider coming out with you. One of the hardest things that can come from or come out of healing from a narcissistic family system is that you learn it's complicated. That there are still people in that system who matter to you, who you see as being harmed by the system too. And when you are courageous enough to plumb the depths of this pain, of your pain, and learn about it, and radically accept, and go through guilt and grief and shame and all of it, and feeling disloyal even for calling it what it is, but you start to heal, you want other people to know what you know, to have the revelations you have had, to be able to set themselves free of this, or at least a little more free than they are. And you know that they have suffered too. So when they don't avail themselves of your help or only do it by halves or try to pull you back in, it can feel devastating. Some people feel as though they have failed the people in their family who don't get out. Some doubt their decision, wondering, well, maybe I could tolerate having this abusive, narcissistic parent in my house and near my kids if that means I could have the long-suffering other parent along for the Thanksgiving too. You have been having to make impossible decisions like this for a lifetime if you're from one of these families. And healing means that you can do your best. But if someone won't take the helping hand, the life preserver, the leg up, you don't have to risk yourself any further to help them. The hardest thing to do at that point can be to know you offered all the options and walk away. It is our compassion that keeps us stuck. We view people as heroes when they give up their lives to save another. But there's a risk to that kind of thinking here, because this isn't a burning building or a literally drowning person. It is a narcissistic person who has people psychologically imprisoned. And while some of you may feel that you may be able to tolerate being around the harmful narcissistic parent just to be able to see the other parent you care about or another family member you care about, for others of you, you might find it's just too painful. But being put in this impossible position has been your whole life story. To have contact with people you may care about, you have to be in proximity to a harmful person. It feels like you're regularly having to engage in the judgments of Solomon after a while. Healing means safeguarding yourself, because you are often having to choose between guilt and anger. The guilt of walking away from the person in your family you truly want to help, and the anger of getting pulled back into a system you worked so hard to disengage from. The vacillation between those two poles is devastating because neither one of them feels good. It's not as simple as walk away and preserve yourself. It's walk away and live with that sense once again of I'm the bad one. This was a powerful moment in the conversation with the spectacular group of folks who were, that I was talking with in London. And many of us resonated with it. The sad thing is that so many people try to simplify the experience of narcissistic relationships. Oh, well, if your parents are narcissists, then you just need to set boundaries and communicate clearly, and relationships are sometimes about making sacrifices. No, it's really about choose which negative emotion you can live with. Letting someone else down, or letting yourself down, or guilt, or anger, or shame, or grief. Which one are you going to choose? You can't win in these relationships, and nowhere is that more profound than in the impossible choices we have to face in a narcissistic family. And the grief of that idea, the person saying, sure, yes, no, of course I want to come to your house for the holidays. But after years of finally putting a boundary against that other narcissistic parent, it was just too painful to see, to understand that that's going to be the price of admission. Means that many times it feels like you've gone right back to square one on that grief. You can offer help, but it's not your responsibility to force someone to take it. I have no doubt that some of you who've been in this situation, you understand narcissistic relationships now. Someone close to you is in one. You try to help them, and you almost watch them get sucked back in it, and there's a unique grief to that. Let's talk about that. The problem, really, of getting awakened to the perils of narcissism in relationships is that you may just want to start helping other people, right, who are going through this. You may witness it in their relationships. You may want to save them. You may want to teach them about it. You want to teach them that the other person, the narcissistic person, isn't going to change. As much as you want to do it, and it's actually not the best idea, because frankly, what may happen is you may lose them. And I know some of you have been in this situation, so let's take a look at this. let's say you have a friend, right, who's in a relationship with, or they're married to a narcissistic person. Just it's very emotionally abusive and manipulative. And you tell them straight up, hey, yo, this, who you're married to, is an emotionally abusive narcissistic person. They're never going to change. You have to get a divorce. Another example could be that you have a sibling and you keep seeing that sibling getting pulled into the mud with a narcissistic parent or parents that you have long since distanced from. And you say to your sibling, you say, hello, dad is a narcissist. What are you doing? You have to stop doing stuff for them, or you have to create a life for of your own. And you may even go a bridge further and say that, listen, I'm not coming to the holidays this year, or I'm not coming to our parents' 80th birthday celebration, and keep enabling this mess. It's another example. Here's yet another example. You have a friend who has remained in a job that you left because of a toxic boss. And you say to your friend, hey, he is a raging narcissist. You are never going to get promoted here. You are better than this place. You can get out and find another position. I did. Another example. You may be part of a friend group that has a narcissistic person within that friend group. And you reach out to one of the other people in the group, and the person in the group who's always trying to accommodate or make excuses for that narcissistic person. You say, I'm going to make up a name here. Hey, Kathy is really narcissistic. I have tried to meet her halfway myself, but it doesn't work. And she treats you so horribly. She is so mean to you. And you may, again, go a bridge further and say, listen, I love spending time with you and other people in this group, but I do not like Kathy. And I'm not going to come to these weekly walks anymore because that's not good for me. So maybe in this last example, you have an adult child who's in a relationship with, or about to marry, or in a marriage with a narcissistic person. Maybe you had a suspicion about the person they were going to marry, and you finally say to them, maybe before the wedding, hey, please be careful. This person you're marrying, like these patterns are a lot like, for example, I saw in my marriage. I don't want this to happen to you. And you might say something like, hey, at least slow down. Slow it off. Hold off on setting a date. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different examples. And listen, you may really see it. And in some cases, have been hurt by the narcissistic person you're talking about. For example, if it's also your parent in the case of the sibling, or it's another friend in a group you're in, or it's your former boss or colleague, or it may be something that you're watching from the outside. For example, the friend's marriage. You may not have that much contact with their spouse. And perhaps the reason you really get it is because you yourself went through the awfulness of a toxic divorce or breakup. And it's so obvious when you see it in another relationship. It is painful when you can glimpse literally into a person's future and know that the situation's never going to change or get better. But the greater grief is when you start losing the person that you were trying to help. In some cases, they may straight up get angry at you and push back. They may even suggest that you're the one who has something wrong with you. Maybe even you're narcissistic. They may get more and more uncomfortable with you. They may disengage from you. And sadly, they may also either quickly or slowly step away, and you may actually just watch yourself losing them. The conversations with them may become more stilted or awkward. They may stop returning your calls and messages, or at least take a long time to do so. And all of this is going to bring up grief, and it gets very complicated. In some cases, you might even have this experience or this feeling that they chose the narcissistic person over you, that your sibling continuing to defend the emotionally abusive narcissistic parent can almost feel like a replay of childhood stuff, like the parent finally winning in their selfish triangulation that they've been doing to you since you were kids. And that grief can be magnified because you genuinely love and wanted to help that sibling and get them away from something that was limiting them. In the case of a friend or someone close to you, or even a sibling who may be in a committed relationship or a marriage to a narcissistic person, listen, if they do not, cannot, or will not leave that narcissistic relationship, and you tell them, hey, yo, you're married to a narcissist, then the awkwardness quotient for you and this friend is going to go way up. And your friend may either feel too exposed, they may feel shame, or they just may not want someone in their life who views their relationship that way. You know damn well from watching this channel, whether this is your first video or your 1,000th. You also know from doing your own work on this, from your own education, reading, videos, whatever, that in many of these cases, you do lose the friend or family member or the person you're trying to help and teach about narcissism, because at some level that person kind of knows it a little. It may be unprocessed, it may be buried, it may be concealed and denied by the trauma bonding of it all. But this person close to you knows something isn't right. But you coming in hot with what you know kills the hope and may even be a mirror for their own shame. In those cases, it's the shame messenger that's the one who's killed, not the narcissist. But you've been there and you know that you were not ready to hear it until you were ready to hear it. So if someone had come in strong and talked to you about your narcissistic mother or your moderately psychopathic husband, or that your friend from college is a sociopath, that you may have reeled a bit before you were ready to hear it and empathize that you too might have pulled back. However, once you see it, once you get it, it's impossible to unsee it. You feel it in your body, and then your mind acknowledges it, and then there's no looking away. You will see the patterns with far more clarity, but growth and awareness have to be on each individual person's own timeline. You might be wondering, okay, good and well, what the hell am I supposed to do? Just watch this train wreck? Well, if you want to be there for someone, but you don't want to lose them, because sadly, if they do pull away or walk away from you, then they are losing a validating, knowing, seeing voice. That's gone for them, which means that they may get pulled more deeply into the dysfunctional orbit of the narcissistic relationship and its associated enablers, right? So just that there's that relationship has its own gravity, right? It becomes a balancing act. So you got to start with basics. Just listen to your friend or family member. Don't try to fix or solve or even educate, but empathize. Let them know you hear that it's hard. Let them know that it's hard and vulnerable to share these things, and it can really feel scary to be that vulnerable, and let them know that you're there for them. When a person knows that they can share stuff that is confusing and maybe even embarrassing, and then somebody isn't trying to push them into choices that they don't feel ready to make, I promise you that they will come back around. And keep checking in with that person. Again, it doesn't need to be heavy-handed. You don't need to text them and say, I'm worried about you, are you okay? Instead, just say, hey, I was reaching out, I was just thinking about you. And then take a page out of the playbook of folks who are like cult experts, like Dr. Janja Lalich, who works with families who have lost family members to cults. One thing she teaches people to do is remind the person who you are watching in this narcissistic relationship of things they used to love. Throw back to old memories. To that friend, say, hey, don't you remember when we used to do these long hikes in the mountains? Or to the sibling, it may be, I remember you used to be so good at working on those old cars. Do you still do that? It becomes a throwback to a version of them that wasn't as silenced by this relationship. It's sort of a gentle excavation and a reminder of all those parts of them that may have gotten lost in this relationship. Talk about that part of themselves. Let them share that part of themselves, but don't go heavier than that. You can also share observations if you see something. So perhaps you might see the narcissistic person in their lives yell at them or be dismissive of them. And you can gently say, hey, I overheard all of that. Sorry. Or I saw what happened. I'm just checking in. That was tough. Like, nobody deserves that. Just a little nudge that it isn't okay without coming in strong and saying, hey, your wife is an abusive narcissist. That tiny bit of validation can dim the gaslight ever so much. And if and when the day comes that your friend asks for more pointed guidance or advice, still don't take the bait. Come in slow. You can say that the patterns that you've been watching and hearing about aren't okay, and that you're concerned because it seems like it hasn't changed and it's been like this for a while, that you're noticing that your friend or whomever it is, you've been more sad and distracted, but you still got to hold back on. And that's because the person in your life is a raging, manipulative, abusive narcissist. We're not saying that part. that stays up here. You focus on the patterns. You let this person you care about know that they're not crazy. If they ask for a therapy referral and you've got one, give it to them. If they ask about a book or something to learn from, recommend it, but gently, without an agenda. One of the more complicated situations is when it is your own adult child, and the choice they might be making in an intimate relationship might be reminiscent of something like your own narcissistic marriage, because your adult child may still be angry and may even push back with, hey, instead of criticizing the person I'm about to marry, maybe you were the problem in the marriage. To not be able to protect a child, even when they are an adult, is painful. And when your child goes down that path or walks down that aisle with their narcissistic partner, and you know that it will have ramifications for your ongoing relationship with them or with grandchildren, and just a relationship you may have worked very hard to heal, especially if you have been through a narcissistic marriage yourself with their parent, it's a uniquely painful situation. And it may not even be that you had a narcissistic marriage, but maybe you came from a narcissistic family of origin. And maybe you managed to not get into that kind of marriage and you had a healthy marriage. But then you see your child about to marry someone narcissistic, and it can feel like a generational curse has come back. But adult children will often discount relationship advice from their parents, or may view it through the perspective of that, oh, mom, you just don't want to let me go. And it ain't that. It can be horrifying to try to build bridges with their narcissistic partner and have to swallow everything into yourself just because you know that you're doing this as a way to remain a support to your adult child, to remain in your adult child's life, and the inevitable mess that you can see is coming. However, there are two, even more, last parts to this. Remember that you still have to care for you. You can't rescue everyone. And for example, that sibling you are trying to save, you may still maintain whatever boundaries you have set with your parents, and you may need to grapple with whether you do attend the family event when you know it's going to set you back. And remember that your sibling does have free will, that they've got to go through their process and make this choice. Or in that example of the friend group, you may still opt not to go to the birthday party for Mary, whom you adore, because of the Kathy of it all is too much for you. And you might find a time to just go out with Mary alone. Helping someone you care about doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. And that distinction and breaking out of that cycle, it's a tough pattern to break. And here's the tough part. You can be careful and approach so carefully and not say anything that would be overwhelming for someone close to you about what's clearly a toxic relationship, and you still may lose them to the vortex of the narcissistic relationship, because that's what these relationships do. They isolate people. And in a strange, almost imperceptible way, when someone in a system sees or gets the narcissistic relationship, a sort of adult truth seer, I guess, it's not unusual for the narcissistic person that is in the life of this person you care about to start encouraging more distance from you. The narcissistic parent, for example, implying that, you've always been a problem to that sibling that you were trying to protect and pull out of that system. Or your friend's spouse painting you as being a not so good friend or dropping lies about you. Or the toxic boss sharing an untrue piece of information about why you are no longer working there. And without you doing or saying anything, you may still lose them to the narcissistic relationship, because it really is like losing someone to a cult, except this is a cult of two. But the grief of losing someone to a narcissistic relationship, especially as you're watching it happen, merely because you didn't want them to waste as much time as you did, it can be uniquely painful, and it's all about approach. And sometimes slow and steady wins the race, much as you want to scream from the rooftops to them, run, run, run away. It's never going to change. They have to come to that on their own, and the best that most of us can hope for is to be a soft place to land. So some of you, many of you, likely grew up in a household characterized by a marriage with at least one narcissistic parent. And so you had most likely, I mean, heaven help those who had grew up with two narcissistic parents. I have to believe that there's some special place and that there's I'd like to think that something joyful will happen to fix all that, because that's a mess. But many, and the modal issue is that most people have one narcissistic relationship and one parent who's not. Here's the question I've been getting from more than a few viewers who've asked, what the hell am I supposed to do about this when I'm an adult? So let's take that on. So it's a funny burden to have to carry when you had one narcissistic parent, one parent who wasn't a narcissist. What do you do? I mean, it was bad enough when you were a kid. What do you do as an adult? So this is such a tough question. I actually sat on this question for a few months before I made this video, because there's such a range of reactions people have to this situation, and that would have bearing on what people will do as the adult children in these situations. So basically the situation is that your parent is still married. They're staying in that relationship. So it is like watching a person die on the vine, or at least a navel on the vine. So let's talk about the versions of this. Again, these parents are still married to each other, okay? There's the person whose parents stayed, and the parent who stayed is a decent person, a good person who did their best, who loved you, who tried their best to protect you, but for whatever their reasons were, generational, money, culture, religion, fear, they never left. Second scenario is the person whose non-narcissistic parent stayed, but was completely detached when you were a child. Your narcissistic parent would rage at all of you, but the parent, your non-narcissistic parent, didn't even try. They may have even just gone along to get along, and for the same reasons as above, they may have stayed in the relationship. The third version of this is the person whose non-narcissistic parent, who literally didn't see it, and may have been the narcissistic parent's chief enabler, saying nonsense like, your parent loves you, or you're being ungrateful. They were basically playing Iago to your narcissistic parent's Othello. And then, obviously, there is the person who has two. Their parents stay together and both parents are narcissistic. Like I said, heaven help you. So they have been literally a co-perpetrator of narcissistic abuse. But I don't think that's what the question I've been getting is about. So let's start with the first one. I think in some ways this is the hardest one when you're the adult child. The loving, decent parent who stayed, who did their best in an atrocious circumstance. Like I said, this may be the most difficult of all because you care about them. You can see the cumulative suffering your parent has experienced. You may even have survivor guilt if you moved away as early as you could and stepped away from the situation. You may have tried to encourage your non-narcissistic parent to leave 1,000 times. You may have offered to help them to leave, told them they could stay with you, offered them money. You may keep trying to point out how awful your narcissistic parent is, and they may even agree with you. But whatever those ties that bind, and they are tight, culture and religion may be at play, and that may even frustrate you as well. But at some point, you'd have to give in to that radical acceptance that everyone has their path to follow. The challenge is if it's not a cultural issue, but money, and you offer money and support, they still stay. That's when it seems like something else is keeping them in this toxic relationship. Remember that people who survive long-term narcissistically abusive marriages are often quite trauma bonded. So even if they can articulate what was wrong, that doesn't mean that they will leave. Aging doesn't help, and duty and an obligation may leave your non-narcissistic parent feel as though they're now stuck after a certain age. So what do you do as the adult child? Therapy, as much as you can get into, because many people feel tremendous guilt and tremendous grief in these situations. You may be experiencing a complex mix of emotions, not just guilt and grief, but also anger and disappointment. You may wish that they did leave and salvage your childhood. However, you may also have warm feelings toward this parent, and at best, all you may be able to do is just be there for them, even if they don't leave. Some people can't watch the mess of their narcissistic parents' marriage with the non-narcissistic parent and step away, which, by the way, is okay. Over time, the grief of witnessing this may be too overwhelming. If you can give up on the hope of them leaving and then being there and staying in touch in whatever way that feels comfortable, maybe sometimes giving your long beleaguered parent some pleasant experience, a grandchild visit or a trip or taking them out, that might make a difference. You won't be the one to convince them to leave, so stop trying. It's exhausting both of you. The second scenario, with those of you who had the detached parent, who was not narcissistic but detached, that's more complicated. You may have felt very abandoned by this parent as a child, and as the narcissistic parent raged around you, the other parent was completely psychologically absent, which often left you feeling unsafe. That non-narcissistic parent may have made the meals, gone to work, come home at night, kept the house running, whatever their role was. But for some survivors, the anger that the non-narcissistic parent in this case just mentally checked out while the rage of the narcissistic parent was spinning around can be hard to get past, even if you understand it. As an adult, you may be able to frame the detached parent's conduct as a trauma response, especially if the narcissistic abuse was bad. But that said, it also made your childhood much worse. In these cases, it may be harder to reach back in. You may still deeply pity your parent who's stuck in that narcissistic marriage. You may feel you want to help them in ways you can. But given the detachment, it may be much harder than those who had a loving relationship with that non-narcissistic parent. And even practical factors like culture or religion or money, even when those aren't at play, folks who have this detached traumatic response from long-term exposure to this relationship, the grief can be overwhelming for you as you witness it keep happening. So what do? As you know, I'm going to say therapy is very important. This was a really hard way to grow up. Many people who grow up with this not only had to manage the narcissistic abuse of the one parent, they may have also experienced neglect, abandonment, and felt really that all of that harmed you going into adulthood. Through that work, you may make decisions about what works for you. Some folks decide to detach from that detached parent themselves. Some gain more compassion for that parent's plight and offer up empathy. Some may have empathy but can't watch the toxic situation any longer. Only you know what fits right, and none are wrong. You may step in when that detached parent gets sick, but the ongoing of the observation of the situation can take a toll on you, and it's very unlikely that that parent will do things like get therapy, or certainly you asking them to leave will not only be a waste of breath, but also leave you feeling more depleted. The third scenario, the parent who enabled the narcissistic parent, all I can say is yikes. That's a no-win. There can be extreme anger on your part of having your parent be the one who basically emboldened the abusive narcissistic parent, and this may result in feelings of betrayal as well. This can make it really difficult to move forward. Some people may feel the need to tell the enabler the harm that they did, but in most cases, they will not care and will just keep enabling, repeating the harm for you throughout your adulthood. You will frustrate yourself to no end if you try to open up this enabling parent's eyes. So this may be one where you learn to say, done, quit. You may actually like some aspects of the enabling parent. So perhaps if you do spend time with them, try not to talk about the narcissistic parent or have time-limited visits with them. So what do you do here? Figure out, if you want, how you can fit the enabling parent into your life. Again, only if you want. In some ways, such parents are completely impermeable, and not talking about your narcissistic parent is important, as it can be really exhausting to hear the enabling rhetoric again and again. Your enabling parent may be so trauma bonded and brainwashed that they don't even see what they're in, even though you can. Assuming that your parent, your enabling parent, is safe, they have sort of cast their hat in a ring, and it's not your job to maintain their delusion. Trying to communicate with them, with this group, most of all, is completely pointless. So again, don't exhaust yourself. Radical acceptance goes a long way here. And if you grew up in the two narcissist situation, I hope you have one hell of a shrink, because this may be one to walk away from. Make no mistake, on any given week, one of them may very well be likely trying to use you as supply or to triangulate. No need to go on a rescue mission here. Let them have each other and move into your own life. Because the situations of parents who stay in long-term narcissistic relationships are so varied, there is no one path forward for adult children. Many people exhaust themselves trying to encourage a parent to leave, and may find that over time they just can't bear to watch it anymore. Your parent will have to hit their own rock bottom, and may never hit their rock bottom, before they do that. And you, as their adult child, aren't likely to be the one to show them the way out. The feeling of frustration, disappointment, and anger at a parent who stayed in one of these relationships is to be expected, as is the grief, and ultimately, you aren't responsible for the decisions your parent makes about their marriage. You have enough trying to heal from growing up like that. So I hope this answers the questions of the many people say, what do I do as an adult child when I had a narcissistic parent and the other parent stays? It's a more common scenario than you think, and it can really create a heavy legacy for you in adulthood, where you still find yourself not only trying to do your own healing, but carrying the burden of still feeling that you owe something to that other parent.